And on to Kremlin criticism. Billionaire Oleg Tinkov, one of Russia's most well-known businessmen, is strongly denouncing Russia's invasion of Ukraine and urging the West to do more to, quote, stop this massacre. CNN's Nick Robertson joins us now. Nick, we had friend of Alexei Navalny and the executive director of Russia's Anti-Corruption Foundation on earlier this week, and he said that there has to be a way back for some of these sanctioned businessmen, these oligarchs. If they denounce the regime and they denounce the war, there has to be a way back from the sanctions. And it does seem to be, at least as far as the denouncing is concerned, that's what Tinkov's doing.
He is. He's also talking about a way back for President Putin. He's incredibly critical of Putin, scathing in a way that no oligarch currently in the orbit of President Putin has been so far, calling the war insane, saying that there's a terrible army, that the generals are waking up from hangovers, realizing this, that an era, and this is where the criticism becomes very direct of President Putin and the failure of the army, by saying this sort of era of civility and groveling and nepotism is what's led across the country, is what's led to the fact that the army can't fight and that making losses. So really is laying this right at the feet of President Putin, and criticizing the civil servants who work in the Kremlin, saying that they're in shock that their children can't go and holiday on the French Riviera. It's not clear if he's talking about the Kremlin spokesman there or the Russian foreign minister, but these are certainly men whose children, stepchildren, travel around Europe. So he's taking a real aim at the top, at the second level, but at the same time, as I say, sort of trying to find a way out for Putin, saying that the West should find a face-saving way out for President Putin, which I think really gets to the core issue here, that this is all about President Putin. Tinkov understands this. It's not about anyone else. Putin is stuck, if you will, in this war that he created, on this narrative that he created. But it's not clear that Putin is going to listen, or precisely what he'll do to try to silence Tinkov. This is not the sort of message that Putin wants spreading around Russia right now.
Yeah, Nick, you pulled out the two quotes that I saw as well. In a country riddled with corruption, nepotism, sycophancy and civility, how can the military be effective? And to your point, dear collective West, please give Mr. Putin an exit to save his face and stop this massacre. Please be more rational and humane. Nick, you've said this all the way along. There needs to be an off-ramp. There needs to be a way for President Putin to say, I've got some kind of victory and I've succeeded here. And he's pointing to that too. What does that look like at this stage? And how does the West provide it? Should they provide it?
It's going to be very difficult. The issue of war crimes and allegations against President Putin and his forces are stacking up. There are investigators right now. The European Union, European Council President is in Kyiv right now, talking about how the European Union can support in the investigation of war crimes, amongst other things. As that evidence mounts up, it's very hard to see an international community currently backing Ukraine in a humanitarian way, economically, militarily, is going to step back from what Ukraine demands, which is that Russia should get off its territory, that their forces should go back to pre-February 24th positions. So as long as President Putin continues that level of aggression that's underway right now, and his forces dispersed in parts of Ukraine where they never were before, it's hard to see how anyone in the international community could find a face-saving way for President Putin that didn't look like appeasement. That's going to be tough. So the move, it seems, is also going to have to come from within Russia, from people like this oligarch and others, to convince Putin that he also has to do something. It can't all come from the West.